Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Alex and today I get to talk about all of the 5-star reads that I had in 2023. These books are not going to be in any particular order, so I'm going to kind of just dive in. First up is The Mountain and the Sea by Ray Naylor. This is the story of Dr. Ha Win, who is a marine biologist tasked with studying a super intelligent, human-hating species of octopus that have started murdering us. Win is assisted by a traumatized drone specialist and the world's first ever true AI, Evrim, who is also my favorite character. This book blew past being considered simply fascinating. It is deeply philosophical, it is rooted in science, and so much research went into creating this story. Really, the only reason I could see that somebody wouldn't enjoy this story is that occasionally it can be kind of info dumpy, it can be a bit preachy, you're not going to necessarily spend as much time with the octopuses as you might like, but those things didn't hinder the story for me, so it's entirely possible that you will end up liking it regardless. Up next is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, and this is the story of Jason Dessen, who is a genius that decided to become a husband and father over an award-winning scientist. One night he is abducted by a man who asks Jason, "Are you happy with your life?" And when Jason regains consciousness, he is greeted by a man who says, "Welcome back, my friend." And Jason has to piece together whether the reality that he's just entered or the reality he thought he was living in is the real one. I am a huge fan of Blake Crouch. I've had 2 5-star reads from him, and honestly I could say at this point he's one of my favorite authors. He's deeply creative, he's all about the science, and his writing is both emotional and thrilling. You'll find yourself going, "Wait, what?" while reading this story, and that's something that I absolutely love about his writing. At number 3 is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, and this was actually my first 5-star read of the year. This is the story of Liesel Memminger, who is a young girl on the side of Nazi Germany during World War II in 1939. Her life is changed forever when one day she finds partially hidden in the snow a book called The Gravedigger's Handbook, and this sends her down her path of loving books and learning to read, and ultimately stealing books from around her community. This story is incredibly unique because it is told mostly from the perspective of Death as he is reflecting on Liesel's life as well as the war. This book absolutely deserves to be the #1 rated book on Goodreads. At least that's what I heard recently, is it was the #1 rated, because it has almost 2.5 million reviews, and the average rating of those 2.5 million reviews is over 4.3 stars. At the very least, I can guarantee you that this is something that is worth your time if you are a fan of historical fiction. I was super tardy to the party getting to this. I pretty much always am when it comes to popular books, but I'm very happy that I got to this year. This is a heartfelt story. It provides a unique perspective, getting to see from the side of Germany during World War II, because most books are not like that. And I will say that Liesel and her family and her friends are all interesting characters because they are not perfect. They're kind of morally gray. They have a lot of adversity, and they sometimes handle that adversity in less than ethical means. I want to be extremely clear that the only people who would despise this book are Nazis. This is not a pro-Nazi story. This is not about how Germany and the Nazis were right. So if you're going into this thinking or being concerned that that's the narrative of this book, it isn't. I promise. Honestly, I would just tell you to read this if you haven't already. I can almost guarantee that you would love it. Up next, I have Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is the story of Sam Mosser and Sadie Green, who decide to go into video game development together. But it is so much more than that. This book deeply analyzes their relationship with one another as well as the other people that they hire in their company to produce their games, and it is absolutely incredible. This book covers a lot of hard-hitting topics, but the one that resonated with me the most was about being a woman in nerd culture, so I naturally was able to relate the most to the character of Sadie Green. This book won Book of the Year through the Book of the Month Club, and I think that it absolutely deserved it. The only people I think who would not enjoy this story are people who don't play video games and therefore wouldn't get the references. Now, you could absolutely read this book even if you don't play games and still enjoy it, but you get that extra element, that extra bit of satisfaction if you're somebody who gets the references or has like any basic understanding of how video games are programmed. So Just know that going into it. If you're not somebody who likes to game, you might not get as much out of this, but in terms of a general overall story, this is fantastic regardless. The fifth book I have to talk about is The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. This was a National Book Award winner and is a young adult novel. This tells the story of Junior, who is an indigenous kid growing up on the Spokane Indian Reservation. After having a heartfelt conversation with one of his teachers, he decides to leave the reservation to go to an all-white school. And while he is doing this to better his life and his education overall, he knows that leaving the reservation is viewed as a betrayal by the other members that live there, and he has to deal with the fallout of his relationships with the people that he grew up with. This book surprised the hell out of me. Alexie is so blunt and so honest on a variety of topics, but he's never preachy in any way. And you can tell that this book is loosely based on his life growing up on the Spokane Indian Reservation, and it felt that much more personal because of it. It handles topics like substance abuse, bullying, friendship, and even death, and I can honestly not think of a single reason why anybody would not love this book. Number 6 is The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez. This is the story of Naya Imani, who is a captain untethered in time. She's a cargo transporter where 8 months for her is 15 years for everyone else. So over the course of her contract, she watches entire lives go by when she is virtually unchanged. This produces a kind of existential dread for Naya, but her life takes on a new meaning when she is tasked with taking care of a mute boy who has an amazing gift. This is a deeply hard-hitting book. If you were going into this expecting a warm and fuzzy found family story the way that I did, I am telling you right now that you are going to be absolutely emotionally destroyed. And I want you to read it anyway. Why? Because it's worth it. There are so many ideas in here that are executed spectacularly and in a unique fashion. I have honestly never read a book like this before, and I think it would be very hard for me to find another one that's even remotely like it. I love the character perspectives. I love the time jumps. I love the corporate greed that really is the main cause of suffering of this entire story. There is also quite a bit of LGBTQ representation in here, so if you are looking for a hard-hitting science fiction novel that includes that element, I'm going to direct you to this book immediately. Number 7 is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and this of course is the story of Addie LaRue, who made a deal with a dark spirit in exchange for her soul. The spirit manipulated Addie's wish to make it to where she will live forever, but no one will remember her, in the hopes that she will fall into despair and give up her soul willingly, but she doesn't. 300 years after she makes her deal, she ends up having a chance encounter with a boy who does finally remember her. Normally, this would not have been a book I really would have picked up on my own. Of course, I had heard a lot about it. I knew that it was highly regarded, but I am not a fan of romances. So when my subscribers were telling me, you have to read this, I went, okay, I'll cave, I'll try it. I didn't really expect to like it all that much, and fortunately, I was totally mistaken. It is so much more than just a romance. It is this slow build of painstakingly going through the years of Addie's life as she has to adapt and change to the world around her while also being antagonized by the spirit who did this to her. It's so emotional, and the chapters have these great endings that kind of leave you on the edge of your seat and get you to keep reading. I thought that this book was going to be full of a ton of really just sappy or just overdone romance tropes, and I'm very happy to say that it wasn't, and it also didn't end in the way that I expected it to at all, and I was floored. Let me tell you, floored by the ending of this book. Loved it, highly recommend it. I'm grateful to my subscribers who told me to read this book because they were absolutely right. If there's one detail of this book I wish I would have gotten more of, it was when Addie was referencing that during one of the Great Wars she was a spy and was kind of going back and forth between the sides because she speaks all of these languages. I wish we would have gotten to see that, but honestly the book was not hindered by the fact that we didn't. I guess wanted more of the story. Up next is a Desolation called Peace by Arkady Martine, and this is actually the second book in the Takes-Kalan duology. The first book is A Memory Called Empire. Now, A Memory Called Empire got 4.5 stars. This is an excellent book. This is an excellent duology, but I did enjoy A Desolation Called Peace a little bit more, and since it got 5 stars, it's the one that made this list. If you want to know why I like this book a little bit more, it's for a couple reasons. The first is that we get aliens in here and a first contact story, which I thought was absolutely incredible. But the other reason is that A Memory Called Empire was solely from the perspective of Mahit Dismare, who is obviously our main character in that first book. But in here, she's still an important part of the story, but she's not the only character perspective that we get. We also get to see from 3 Seagrass and 8 Antidote and some other characters that we get our first introduction to them in this story. And I thought that it made the entire narrative a lot richer, and I appreciated this more, so that's why this one gets 5 stars. These books actually got their own video, completely spoiler free, so if you're interested in watching that and hearing a little bit more about what this narrative is about, feel free to go and check out that video. Otherwise, I'm just going to move on to the next one. For the 9th book, I have The 100 Years of Lenny and Margot by Marianne Cronin. This is the story of Lenny, 17, and Margot, 83, who meet in a very unexpected place, the art program of their local hospital. Both women are long-term patients in the hospital who don't have any friends or family to come visit them, so they kind of spark their own friendship and start swapping stories of their lives. This novel is actually Lenny's diary, where she writes down details of her own thoughts and feelings and her own stories, but also catalogs all of the ones that she hears from Margot. This book also got its own video where I also included a spoiler section. My review for this book is a little bit longer than some of my other reviews, but if you are not interested in watching that video, I will tell you right here that this was actually Cronin's debut novel. It took her 7 years to write, and you can tell how much care and love and thoughtfulness went into this story. This book might be very difficult for you to read if you are somebody who has ever experienced cancer or knows somebody who is going through cancer treatment right now. Now, there were some baffling reviews, we'll say, on Amazon in terms of the reasons why people didn't enjoy this story. Most people loved it. Most people gave this 5 stars like me, but I want to very quickly go over reasons why you may not enjoy this story. The first is that people complained that Lenny sounded too old for her age, that she couldn't possibly write this way or think this way at 17, and to that I say she's a very intelligent young woman, and not every teenager's an idiot. The second largest complaint is that there were some members of the Christian faith who read this book and didn't like the theological debates between Lenny, who is a non-believer, and Father Arthur, who is the hospital pastor. There were also some complaints that Father Arthur didn't condemn one of our characters in here who is of the LGBTQ community. The reason I find those comments so baffling is that Father Arthur is portrayed in an incredibly positive light in here. Yes, Lenny and him disagree theologically. No, Lenny might not believe the same things as him, but guess what? They were still really good friends who loved and cared about one another, and that was supposed to be the point of the story, or at least one of the points, I should say. There are many points in this book, but if you wouldn't like it just because Lenny is asking Father Arthur some hard-hitting questions about his religion, I would recommend that you don't read this. If you're somebody who wouldn't like this because there is a positive portrayal of an LGBTQ person talking to a pastor who doesn't condemn them for being a member of that community, I don't know why you're watching my channel, because I support the gays on this channel, and you wouldn't like this book regardless, I guess. Number 10 is the only middle grade novel on this list, and that is Roller Girl by Victoria Jameson. This is the story of Astrid, who is now out for summer break, and she decides that she wants to do roller derby camp, but she's gonna have to do it by herself because her best friend that she does everything with has decided to do dance camp instead. I was gifted this Newbery Honor book, so I had absolutely no idea what to expect going into it, but I can say that it has a lot of great adult topics that are covered in here that would be good for young readers to experience. Some of those topics include how to handle friendships that are changing, or how to be open and honest with your family, how to persevere through learning something new that you're really bad at, and also how to be happy for other people who get what you want. This is a great story. And last but certainly not least is volume 11 of the Saga trades, and I love Saga. It's one of my favorite comic books of all time. I would only encourage people to read this, one, if they're really interested in science fiction, and two, if they do not mind not safe for work, sexually explicit content, because there are definitely some panels in these comics that you wouldn't want to be reading in public. We'll put it that way. This is not a romance story. This is not smut. This is just one of those things where a comic book creator decided to include some adult content in here to make it very clear who the reader base is, and if that would offend you, don't pick this up. And that is all that I have for you today. There is the potential that I could read another 5-star book in the last 10 days of the year, but I wanted to get this video out sooner rather than later, so I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have read any of these books or you are interested in reading any of these books, please let me know down in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, that you all stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.